Wyoming Territory, September 1887, just before the first snow. Lightning cracked across the sky like a whip of God casting pale fire over the jagged peaks of the Wind River Range. Thunder rolled in behind it, shaking the earth with a low, angry growl. Zane Northwood hunched in the saddle, pulling his long duster tighter around his shoulders as rain sliced through the dark like thrown nails. His gelding snorted and danced beneath him, flanks slick with water, ears pinned. He should have stayed in the cabin. The clouds had crawled over the mountains that morning, grey-bellied and full of warning, but Zane hadn't listened. The cattle had scattered sometime in the night, panicked by wolves or something worse. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving them to die, not after everything he'd already lost. As he neared the edge of a steep draw, the world broke open again with light. And that's when he heard it. Faint, frayed, human. A cry. He yanked the reins, hauling the gelding to a halt. The horse stumbled in the mud hooves, sliding dangerously. Zane scanned the darkness, heart hammering. Rain stung his eyes, thunder roared again, and then there it was. Closer now, desperate. "Hello," he shouted, voice swallowed by the storm. "Who's there?" A flash of lightning lit the hillside to his left, and for a breathless second he saw her. A figure slumped beside a fallen pine, soaked through. A bonnet clung to tangled hair, and a mud-streaked dress hung off thin shoulders. She didn't move. Zane was off the horse in a blink boots, sinking into the sodden earth. He reached her side, kneeling in the wet ground, her eyes opened wide, wild, full of fear. "Don't touch me," she whispered, though her whole body trembled. "I won't hurt you," Zane said gently, voice low, "but if you stay out here, you'll freeze before morning." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shaking frame. She flinched at first, but didn't pull away. Then, as carefully as if she might vanish, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed too little. The horse sidestepped nervously as he swung her up into the saddle and climbed behind. Together they rode into the night, 1 mile of storm silence, and something neither of them had words for yet. But it had already begun. The cabin door flew open with a kick of Zane's boot, wind howling behind him as he stepped inside with the woman in his arms. He crossed the threshold like he was carrying something sacred, not just broken. Rain clung to her skin, her dress heavy with mud, but she made no sound, just pressed her face to his chest like she didn't want to exist. He set her gently on the cot by the hearth and struck a match, the flame hissing to life and casting golden light across rough-hewn walls. The warmth flickered over her face, pale lips edged with blue and eyes wide with the kind of fear born from too much silence and too many nights alone. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, voice paper thin. "You don't have to explain," Zane murmured, feeding kindling to the fire. "Let's get you warm first." He stripped off his soaked shirt and handed her a wool blanket from the chest. She hesitated just a heartbeat, then took it, wrapping herself like she wasn't sure if she deserved the comfort. "I'm Zane Northwood," he said, offering her a tin cup of warm water. "You got a name." She stared into the fire before answering. "Delia Monroe." "Where were you headed, Delia?" She looked down into the cup. "Nowhere. I was running." Zane sat across from her, close enough to share the fire's heat, but not so close as to cage her. From what her fingers tightened around the cup. "My husband died last winter," she said slowly. Then the hands left. The bank came, said the land wasn't mine, I had nothing. So I walked. The storm caught me near the ridge. Zane studied her face, high cheekbones, dirt smudged along her jaw, and a beauty not born of softness, but of surviving. There were sorrow lines around her mouth that didn't belong on someone so young. "You said," was he said quietly, "means you're alone now." Delia nodded, eyes glassy. "I have no one." Zane leaned back, heart-tugging in a way he hadn't felt in years. "You do now." She looked at him, startled. "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm not the kind of man who leaves someone crying in the mud." "I wasn't crying for help," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But I heard you anyway." And that was enough. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin a fragile calm began to take shape. Zane didn't press her with questions. He didn't crowd her or offer false comfort. Instead, he gave her space, just enough to breathe, just enough to feel human again. When he moved, it was quiet and steady, like a man who had learned long ago that trust wasn't earned by words, but by presence. Delia sat curled by the fire, wrapped in his coat, watching the flames dance as if they could erase what came before. She spoke little, and Zane didn't fill the silence. He simply stayed near, sharpening a knife, boiling water, setting out food, and in that stillness, something unspoken began to settle between them. That night she asked softly, "Why are you up here alone?" Zane didn't look up. Used to be a ranch foreman down near Laramie. Lost my wife in childbirth 3 winters back. Couldn't face the town after that. "I'm sorry," she said, voice barely audible. He nodded once. "Me too." They didn't speak again for a long time, but in the days that followed, silence turned into rhythm. They worked side by side, mending broken fence rails, coaxing frightened calves back through the gate, gathering kindling, cooking beans and cornbread. She moved with practiced hands, not afraid of weight or mud, her body remembering a life she thought she'd left behind. "You're not afraid of hard work," he said once. "I was born to it," she replied. "Folks think women can't manage land. But we do it all the time, just not loud enough to be noticed." Zane gave a quiet chuckle. "You're being noticed now." She looked at him, then something soft flickering across her face. "You don't ask questions like other men." "Maybe I'm not like other men." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. As dusk fell and they rode back to the cabin through gold-swept grass, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Not yet. But the silence between them wasn't made of caution anymore. It was beginning to feel like trust. By the third morning, the frost clung like lace to the windows, and the air held the scent of thawing earth. Zane stepped outside early to haul oats, but when he returned, Delia was already up barefoot near the stove, hair half-braided skillet, hot and bacon crisping. "You didn't have to do that," he said, setting down firewood. "I used your blanket," she replied, not looking up. Seemed fair. Zane washed his hands at the basin, watching her move. Her shoulders stayed tight, as if waiting for something to snap. But her hands didn't hesitate. She moved like someone used to doing more than her share. "You always pay debts that fast?" he asked. "I try," she said. "But I've got more owing than I'll ever pay off." Later, when he mentioned the scattered cattle, she didn't wait for an invitation. "I can help," she said. "We had hands, but when they left, it was just me." "I know how." Zane saddled the horses, surprised at how easily she mounted the smaller roan. Her skirt was hitched above worn boots, and when they rode out, she kept pace beside him, quiet and sure. They mended broken rails, tracked missing calves, and worked the ridge without much talk. Delia lifted heavy fence posts without flinching, waded through mud without complaint. When a calf bawled in the distance, she turned toward the sound with narrowed eyes, already moving before Zane spoke. By mid-afternoon, they'd closed 3 gaps and coaxed 3 calves back inside. "You're not afraid of the work," he said, watching her wipe dirt from her cheek. "I was raised for it," she said. "Most folks just don't see it in women till we're the last ones standing." He gave a half-smile. "You don't talk like someone passing through." She looked at him, steady, direct. "You don't act like someone who needs to be asked to stay." They sat on the porch that night, drinking coffee in the hush after sunset. "I've seen men who talk about promises," she said, "and men who just keep them." Zane sipped slow. "I don't make many, but I don't break the few I do." She nodded once. Steadiness, not sweetness, that was what carried weight. And in the quiet between them, it was enough. Spring softened the ridge, peeling back the frost one breath at a time. Beneath the thawed earth, something else was stirring, unspoken, fragile and real. Zane showed her the hollow past the second ridge, a wide stretch of land, rimmed by pine and lit gold by morning sun. "Most folks pass it by," he said. "Too much work to clear." Delia crouched, running her fingers through a patch of wild rye. "It's good earth," she murmured. "Settles different when it's been left alone a while." He watched her hand press gently into the soil. "Land remembers who's kind to it." She looked up at him. "You talk like it listens." "I don't talk," he said. "I listen." That afternoon they walked the edges of the hollow together, marking where snow lingered longest, where rock cut shallow beneath the grass. She asked about windbreaks, water rights, and timber. He answered with the quiet certainty of a man who'd tended forgotten places and never stopped believing in what could grow. Back at the cabin, she stirred flour in a bowl, sleeves rolled high. If I built a lean-to out there, I'd need pine from the east fence line. Zane leaned in the doorway. That a thought or a plan? I don't make plans without thinking first, she said. He nodded. Then we'll see to it. I've got tools. The saw's sharp. You'd help me if you mean to stay, he said softly. It's no longer just yours to build. They planted the next day. Side by side, she marked the rows with a stick, and he followed, pressing down with the toe of his boot, the way his father had taught him. Seed by seed, the earth opened to hold what they placed inside. You've got a steady hand, she said. I've had practice, he replied. They washed up in the creek sleeves, wet faces, sun-warmed. When Zane asked what she would have done had he not come along, Delia stared into the current. I would have walked until I dropped. Maybe slept under a tree. You don't sound like someone who quits easy. I don't, she said quietly. But I was close. They walked back, slow boots, pressing into soft earth. And though no promises were spoken, something stronger settled between them, like roots finding hold in ground long untouched. They didn't call it love, but they lived it anyway. The wind rolled soft across the ridge, now no longer sharp with winter, but carrying the lull of warmer days. Delia stood barefoot in the garden patch, dragging a rake through loosened soil. Her skirt was dark with dust, her hands lined with labor, but her face held something different now. Not joy, not yet, but steadiness, like a woman who'd stopped running. Zane approached from the tree line, a coil of fence wire slung over his shoulder. The west gate's holding, he said. I checked it to the gulch. She nodded without looking up. I boiled some willow bark this morning. Your shoulder's been stiff since we hauled that timber. He paused, surprised. You watching me that close? I watch what matters. He stepped closer, slower now. You always speak that plain. She turned toward him, brushing sweat from her brow. Not always. But I've lived enough silence to know when truth's the better offering. Zane held her gaze, something unspoken shifting in him. I've been thinking. That land above the creek. It's yours. If you want it. She tilted her head, cautious. And what would you keep? He glanced toward the cabin, then back at her. The rest. And maybe a place beside me if you've got use for it. She didn't speak right away. The wind lifted her hair. She let it fall without flinching. You're not offering charity, she said finally. No, he said. I'm offering a life. Delia stepped closer, slow and certain, until her fingers met his rough palm to rough palm, and neither of them pulled away. I won't run again, she said. You don't have to. They stood beneath the wide Wyoming sky as the light dipped behind the hills, nothing flashy between them, just something earned, something steady. 2 weeks later they married beneath the cottonwood near the creek where the roots held fast and the water ran clear. There were no witnesses, no lace or lacework. Just a man and a woman and 2 rings Zane had carved from shed antler, smooth and worn. She wore hers on a leather cord around her neck. He wore his on the smallest finger of his left hand. It wasn't ceremony that bound them. It was the choice, and neither would ever need to run again. Summer came slow and golden to the hollow. The creek sang through the grass, and each sunrise stretched longer across the field. Delia and Zane moved through the days like a team long practiced, not loud, not hurried, just steady. They lived as man and wife, not in name, but in the rhythm of shared labor and quiet peace. Rows of corn rose behind the cabin, green and straight. The lean-to they'd built offered shade in the heat of the day, a place where they'd sit with tired backs against pine logs and talk about what needed doing next. Chickens scratched contentedly behind a fence Zane had built their clucks, filling the silence that no longer felt empty. They didn't speak much of love, but they lived it in the biscuits Delia baked before sunrise, in the oil Zane rubbed into her sore hands after pulling weeds. In the way they both reached for the same kettle, the same tool, the same task, without asking. She canned peaches and beans in late August, her sleeves dusted with flour and sugar, humming under her breath. He stacked firewood high against the north wall, pausing only to bring her water or taste what simmered in the pot. At dusk, they walked the fence line side by side, boots brushing against dry grass fingers, sometimes grazing without intention, but never by accident. One night, as they sat near the fire, Zane sanding a new handle for his draw knife, Delia hemming a curtain, she spoke without looking up. "You think we're meant to be alone after we lose someone?" Zane didn't answer right away. The needle passed through fabric. His hand worked slow over the wood grain. "I think some of us find our way back," he said. "If we let the pain be part of the map. And if we don't, then we stay lost. But not forever." She looked across the hearth, her eyes steady. "You still believe in something better I believe in today," he said. "The rest can grow from that." That night when she reached for his hand before the lantern was dimmed, he didn't flinch. And when she leaned her head to his shoulder, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence they shared now was a promise stronger than any vow earned, lived, and gently kept. By the time autumn painted the ridge in amber and rust, the cabin stood firm against the coming cold, its walls mended, its roof tight, its hearth steady. Inside, the days passed in rhythm, and the nights no longer held the ache of absence. The past didn't vanish for either of them. It lingered as it always would, but its edges had dulled. What once cut now merely shaped. Their grief had not been erased, only softened by the gentler hands of time and tenderness. Zane still walked the fence lines at dawn, boots brushing frostbitten grass. Delia raked the garden, preparing the soil for sleep, her braid tucked beneath a wool scarf. They didn't speak of forever. They didn't need to. What they built was not based on dreams, it was rooted in days, shared trust earned, and the quiet decision to stay. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the pines, Zane returned from hauling logs and found her kneeling by the fire, mending the shawl she'd worn the night they met. She didn't hear him at first. The cabin was warm with the scent of baked bread and pine pitch. He leaned in the doorway, watching her. "You always fix things instead of throwing them out," he said. She looked up, smiling faintly. Not everything broken needs replacing. Outside, the wind stirred the trees soft and low. No longer the cruel howl that once chased her across the ridge, just a lullaby moving through the branches. Later they sat close near the hearth, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting beneath his chin. They spoke little as always, but every glance, every breath was filled with the quiet knowing of people who had chosen each other not out of need, but out of something deeper. Love, perhaps, or simply peace. By winter, snow came again, but this time it didn't bring fear. It brought stillness, security. The garden lay blanketed in white, the coop full, the woodpile high. The fire never dimmed, and neither did they. Where once the wind howled through empty land, now it whispered through a home, one built not in haste, but in hope. Brick by brick, seed by seed, day by quiet day.